So hello everybody. Sina 7, my name is Marcus. Glad to see you all here. Oh, you made it as well. Great. There's only one inhabitant of Siebenlinden at the conference, but she's not here today. I thought she might be adding to the presentation maybe. Okay, so I started with the image of the island of Utopia, which several of you know already. Utopia is one of the most famous islands in world literature. It was a novel published in 1516 by Thomas Morris, and it was a play on words. So it's, as you said, a non-existent place, but also the good place. So the search for a good place. And as you can see, it's a clearly and well-arranged island in geographic terms, but also in terms of governance. And many intentional communities have been compared to Utopia, often saying that, oh, this is utopic and it doesn't make sense, it's not realistic what you're aiming for. But authors like Joshua Lockyer, for example, have shown that the pursuit of utopia is nevertheless may have transformative effects and may still have positive outcomes, although we may not reach the actual island. And I think you're speaking about another utopian island later on, Anne, Aldous Huxley's island.
Yes, I'll touch on that.
Touch on that, okay. So I think it's no coincidence that utopias are mostly or often islands, and I will dwell on that topic. So let's see if I can use this one. Okay, I'm an anthropologist. There's a specific line of tradition to that, and we prefer islands as well. I mean, they're really convenient research locations. You have these bounded spaces, you have often beautiful sand beaches, and this sense of boundedness led many researchers to assume that you have some sense of cultural coherence as well. So that's an image from the times of World War I, where Bronislaw Malinowski, one of our founding fathers, he was arrested by the English on the Trobriand Islands. So he used his time to invent our most beloved research method, long-standing ethnographic fieldwork, because, I mean, it had to be there anyway. And yeah, and I tried to follow that line of tradition, but I did something wrong, I guess, because I ended up in a very dry region with no ocean next to it. You see a little bit of water here, but not too much. But it's not too bad, because they have beautiful places as well. Like this one, for example. That's where I do most of my research. And well, that's the Ecovillage of Siebenlinden. They have some tents as well, like on Trobriand. And it's an eco-community, an eco-village, which lasted now for 15 years. And about 140 people are living there right now. And as you can see, it's really, I think it's a beautiful place to be here. But the strange thing is, they keep on telling me there that it's not an island. And I was wondering, why are you telling me this? I mean, it's kind of obvious. Island, eco-village, island, eco-village. I mean, they have this colorful things here and here. But I don't know. So this is not an island. The eco-village is not an island, yeah. So I was wondering, okay, what are you trying to tell me with that? And so there are some similarities on a symbolic level between island and eco-village. And the one thing is that, okay, I still have to get used to the thing, that they're kind of bounded spaces. You have this strong focus on one locality. You try to build up this locality. Ideally, you come with a high sense of self-sufficiency and well-arrangedness. And so why is it that so many inhabitants of ecovillages, like Robert Gilman did the day before, say, we don't want to be like an island. So where does this negative quality of an island come from? They want to avoid. And I argue, or this comes out from my interviews, that this is the notion of isolation, that an island also stands for being isolated. And this is what ecovillages do not want to have, obviously. And as one inhabitant of Siebenlinden put it, the image of the island evokes the ocean in between the ecovillage and the rest of society. And this leads to my talk, Must Utopia, the title of my talk, Must Utopia Always Be an Island? Is there a need for that the image of utopia must be island-like, kind of isolated? You find a longer paper in the conference proceedings later on, so this is going to be, I try to be brief, and the subtitle is coming on the next pages. So coming back to the notion of an island. You might say this is kind of ridiculous. I mean, you know, ecovillages, Finton receives several thousands of guests each year. Siebenlinden, among all ecovillages, has the Gen office. It has a lot of connection to other communities like the ZAG, for example, you're coming from, and it has thousands of visitors each year as well. So it's kind of ridiculous. It's not unconnected. It's not really isolated. But then again, Mauritius, for example, is a beautiful island, but it's still an island, although it receives many visitors. So the notion of the island is not really about being connected. It's more about having this clear cut with its direct surrounding, which is the region in the case of Siebenlinden. So there is a difference, a strong difference between the region and Siebenlinden. And it's a region where they feel isolated. And many interviews I conducted in Siebenlinden, people were telling me that without visitors, for example, or without constant stream of guests coming in, they would be feeling very alone there and wouldn't really work out for them. And economically, neither. Okay. So this leads to my subtitle. I cannot connect the notion of an island with the region. And I call the subtitle Positioning an Ecovillage within its region. And this kind of reflects my longer PhD thesis, which is about positioning. And I try to see the identity of an ecovillage through its positioning within several contexts, like the region, like wider society. I can only reflect on it very shortly. But I want to say that positioning is always something which is done by several agents. It's not only the ecovillage which contributes to its identity formation, but also people from the outside. So obviously, this island quality within the region is not only catered for by the ecovillages, but the people from the region as well, the others. But in this talk, I try to focus more on what the ecovillage could change or might change, so I think is more useful. Okay. And I hope to discuss this notion later on with you, because I mean, you have tons of experience where you come from communities, you know this island metaphor probably, and you have more experience. I can present ethnographic research from the Siebenlinden. Okay. So I hope you can read this quote. I just present some quotes. This is by Jonathan Dawson, who used to be the Gen president, and the layout is kind of mixed here. So he said, one final challenge facing ecovillages is that of becoming less insular and more enmeshed in the fabric of their own bioregions. Given the high levels of outreach and engagement with the world, this may seem like a puzzling assertion. Nonetheless, it remains true that many ecovillages are only marginally anchored within their own bioregions. So this is kind of what I try to say as well. They are connected, but within the regions it's kind of less. So again, trying to become less insular. And this is from Siebenlinden, a quote, which really reflects they don't want to be this insular. We don't just want to be an island and have a nice life for ourselves. We want to spread our ideas to the outside world and have them shared and passed on. Okay. So this is where I started my research, where I met Ina and Achim, for example, for the first time. And in Siebenlinden in 2008, they had this Gen GA there, General Assembly. And I think it was quite an interesting time to be there, because Jonathan Dawson, the then Gen president, at that point of time, he advised strongly against the creation of new ecovillages. He said, we don't need no more classic new ecovillage in the sense like Siebenlinden. And instead, he highlighted urban ecovillages like the LA Ecovillage. He highlighted transition towns, which really became a buzzword at that conference. So I thought it was a very interesting time. At the beginning of Gen, Ross Jackson, for example, he stepped in front of the UN and said we need $100 million to build new ecovillages. And he was very fond of that idea that ecovillages are the way to go, and we did as many ecovillages as possible. And here, the Gen president says, okay, we have enough of the classic ones at least. But why did he highlight ecovillages like the LA in urban settings or transition towns? And I think there are many reasons, but one is, well, this is a picture of LA ecovillage. One reason might be that transition towns and urban ecovillages avoid the trap of being island-like. They place themselves where people actually live in urban settings, in existing towns and villages, while Siebenlinden, for example, is really built on a greenfield site, totally set apart a bit from the village nearby to do their own thing somehow. So my impression is, what I said, LA ecovillage, for example, really has a very mixed, ethnic, diverse members, which is very interesting. I've been there for some weeks. and transition towns really try to work with ordinary people, let's say. So I don't want to claim that Siebenlinden is not very active in its region. They really are. So this was a festival. But still, the feeling of isolation remains. In the interviews, this comes out often. And they have all kinds of ideas of how to deal with that. So bring more people in from the outside who are more like us, having guests coming in, go traveling. You have high mobility rates, for example. And in my eyes, at least, ecovillages are really good examples for the idea think global and act local. So they were able to build these strong and exciting localities. But somewhere this intermediate level between global and local, the region, is kind of difficult to connect, it seems. So when I ask, why is it so? So this is an image from the region, it's Beetzendorf, a town nearby. I get three kinds of answers most of the time. A is, we're too busy. We'd love to, but we're too busy. We have a lot to do with building up our island or ecovillage. And The other answer is, the scope of the region, maybe that's too small. I mean, we have more grand ideas. So I had somebody saying, for example, Beetzendorf, I have a bad feeling about being more engaged with the region, all the while forgetting about what's happening in the third world, for example. So the feeling is we should be more global in our scope, and the region is kind of, some say boring, might be true, but it's where they live. And there's another argument which says, I don't even know what to talk about with people from the Altmark, the region. We don't really need the region, and it was like this from the beginning. And this really is the image of the ocean again. And this very person, she went on to draw two circles and saying there's really no connection between us. I mean, these are the people from the Altmark, and these are us, we and them. So what to do? And so in the remaining minutes, how many do I have left, by the way? In the remaining minutes, I'd like to discuss or present some ideas. 8, oh, it's okay. How those circles might meet. Maybe you think it's not even, maybe they don't have to meet, but I think it would be a good idea to follow this. And there are good reasons to follow that utopian vision, which includes both the region and the ecovillage, and have them work together. So, in my eyes at least, no sustainability vision seems complete without the region. So if you think in bioregional terms, for example, it's pretty obvious. And then again, the region is a pretty convenient place to start with your endeavors. I attended one series of meetings where they tried to think of how could we as an ecovillage position ourselves with the global arms trade, for example, or poverty in the third world. And these are good questions, but no projects came out of that line of reasoning. They had really a difficult time seeing what they could do in their locality. And the region, I don't want to say that they should not, but the region is more convenient. It's really next door. But, and I will dwell upon that only very shortly. Another thing is that the notion of home and identity, because as I said before, many people express that they feel kind of alien after all those years being there. And of course, they have all these fantastic people coming in, and they feel connected to Finton, for example, or the ZEC, but they still feel kind of alien in their region. And I think it's important, or that's something the region could do for the ecovillage, or what could be helpful, or where they would need the region to really arrive finally and feel at home and settle their identity, also anchored in the region. So that's something where I could imagine working them together. Okay, the remaining minutes, I briefly, very briefly, I'm very sorry for that, very briefly present 3 instances of my ethnographic research where I think this could be interesting hindrances maybe towards coming to that engagement, and maybe some ideas of what we could do else, what could change. Okay, so I went on something called a transition journey. This was a 2-year project by 5 European ecovillages. You had Siebenlinden, for example, you had Torre Superiore, you had the Austrian Keimblatt ecovillage. And they tried to appropriate the transition town concept for their means. They tried to appropriate it to reach out through the regions. And here you can see Massimo from Torre staging the great unleashing from the transition town concept. They were working pretty hard together. I tried to be the academic advisor. And I want to comment on 3 tendencies I saw through that project. One was that I was kind of missing a strategic orientation towards the region. So they tried to do this here, but it was kind of obvious that it hadn't been there so far. And the other thing is, I think I saw a kind of a centralistic tendency, especially with Siebenlinden, less with Torrey, for example. I will speak about that. And the third thing I want to comment upon is like the image of these two separated entities, these two circles which do not meet. Okay, well, let's start maybe with the paper she's working on here. There was a very interesting incident. I'm sorry, this is in German. This was a presentation chart by Keimblatt Ökodorf. And they're categorizing the largest intentional communities in Europe. And you see Finton, for example, counts as a philosophic, spiritual community, which is fair enough, I'd say. Damanhur as well. And others are more co-housing-like or charitable. And the interesting thing is, because Keimblatt, this is still in planning stage. They aim to be big, but now they dissolved after all. But Keimblatt, as a role model, they always looked to Siebenlinden. If you entered their project center, they had images of Siebenlinden. They were really paying close attention to what's happening in Siebenlinden. And they were peers. And this presentation, and we had a discussion afterwards, this presentation, Siebenlinden is called an idealistic project, while Keimblatt Ökodorf, Ecovillage, is the only one here aiming at a widespread impact towards society. And that was pretty interesting, I thought. And this discussion afterwards Siebenlinden was saying, yeah, but we are authentic. I mean, it could be that we're aiming only towards our alternative circles, might be the truth, okay, but that's how we are authentic in our way. And they said, come on, if we really want to reach society, we have to be strategic at the same time. Well, that was interesting, I thought, and went on, and I will further reflect on this in my thesis, but for this, I think it could at least be useful to really be more strategic. I mean, that's what I take out of this for this presentation. If even peers think, come on, you're really only aiming at yourself and people you already like, your best friends, then that's kind of strange. Okay, so the other thing I noticed is something I would call a centralistic tendency. And really speaking about a circle, I mean, that we're really good at building circles, and it really helps to focus our energy and to get together. But at the same time, it's kind of a centralistic notion. And when I went along with Siebenlinden, I had the impression that they always try to be and they even said so often, they try to be the center in the region as well. Like they always said, we want to be a regional center for sustainability, for example. And they always had solutions for the others, like the people living in the Altmark. And several projects within the region, within this transition journey, did not work out as planned, but they did work out as soon as Siebenlinden tried not to be the center of events. So they had a meeting where people from this transition journey were not present, and in that meeting they decided, yes, we go for the bioenergy thing we long planned. Yeah. So what I try to point at is that I had the impression that people in Siebenlinden, but maybe in other equities as well, were often trying to be either the center or nothing. Yeah, and if you want to be the center, what's left for the others? The periphery. And that's not very sexy, actually. Yeah. So I wouldn't want to be periphery. So as a suggestion, I would like to pick on a phrase which was, I'd like to pick up on the LA Ecovillage. This is a picture by Jenny Pickrell, who's not here. And there's a gate made of bicycle parts. Now, some of you have seen it maybe probably. And it has a wordy name. It's called Multiple Centers of Initiative. So you have a center maybe over there, you have another center here maybe, and one over there. And it's a phrase which was coined by Robert Gilman. And he said a real eco-village, maybe like Finton, should have multiple centers of initiatives. It should not be so centralistic. It should transcend this notion of centralistic notion. And have several centers, multiple centers. And I think that could be a good image for the region as well. Maybe the Ecovillage is one of the important centers, but not the only one. And maybe it's even, I'm about to finish. And maybe it's even possible to learn something from the region. Maybe have them help arriving at the region. And I think Siebenlinden is about to do this more. You had some people joining the local fire brigade, although it's boring. And they have fun there. So I think it's a good way. Okay. So the last image I want to offer is like a different image of an island. To substitute the image of the isolated island, we're really separate entities, because I don't think that's the truth. So I want to offer peninsula. And that was not my idea, yeah. But I think it's a good image because there are connections. I mean, Ecovillage are not. It's not really new. They're building upon the old, and they're showing new ways of dealing with the old and transforming it. And I think this is important to have this connection remaining. People can walk there and go back and forth, and to show we're not totally set apart. We're not really something completely different. We're building with the stuff already there. And yeah, so I think that would be a good image to end and have people looking together towards the utopian horizon. Okay, and thank you very